trust, we have converted them into something else. It's high time we take them as resources, which
True.
often gets regarded as waste. There is a reason. It's not like landfills are hollow,
Hmm.
they're filled with something.
Right.
And when you keep on discarding anything and everything, and you keep on counting on what has gone missing from your material palette, it's not happening like that. Like there is a feed in and there is a feed out. It's not just everything is vanishing in thin air. So
Right.
you better start counting those material as resources. And we often say that our motto, which is on our website as well, that before too soon, when our natural resources become scarce and waste accumulation reaches a tipping point, waste streams will become the future quarries for mining materials.
Hello TFFs, it's your host Raghav. Welcome to season 2 of Tiny Farm Friends podcast. Each week we bring you long form conversations with people using the best of their abilities to foster a healthier world. Nothing in nature exists alone. At Tiny Farm Friends, we believe our collective effort bears an unprecedented transformational power to shape regenerative futures. Join us for a front row seat to the latest insights and developments at the intersection of art, science, design, and technology. Today I am joined by Shubhi Sachan, who believes that everything we call waste can be put to use. Shubhi is a multidisciplinary designer. She is a Tedx speaker and presented her work on prestigious platforms such as Lakme Fashion Week, London Design Week, and Dutch Design Week. Shubhi embarked on her journey to sustainability after working 6 years for big fashion houses when she felt the disconnect between the processes and her principles. Her current practice, Material Library of India, focuses on investigating value chains and making waste materials come to life again. In this conversation, we talk about materials, her journey into sustainability, setting up her practice, Material Library India. We also talk about the future of industrial and agriculture waste, her inspirations, and much more. This was an absolute masterclass for me to understand materiality. This podcast is not only for the designers but for everyone who wants to be more conscious about their daily life consumption choices. So let's rethink waste with Shubhi Sachan.
Thank you so much, Shubhi, for coming to Tiny Farm Friends podcast. And I've been in total awe of your inspiring work that you do at Material Library India. And I'm sure this podcast is going to be an interesting one. At the same time, crash course for me as well as for the listeners when it comes to materiality and material literacy. But before we unwrap those things, let's start with introductions. And I would like to know how you are introducing yourself these days.
So these days, from a long while, almost a decade, I have been introducing myself as a waste researcher. And that kind of triggers the right directed questions towards the thing I want to tell them. So I think telling myself as a waste researcher is what has given me enough opportunity to tell people what do I do.
Right. And I'm also intrigued at the same time, like what your parents perceive what you do, or the immediate family members.
I think uh, I think now the notion has changed a bit, but somehow so far things have been kind of funny. When you tell them that you work with waste or you want to work with waste or you want to work your living, you want to earn your living out of waste. I think that has been right from the beginning, it has been quite funny and surprising, to be honest. Like how can you be employable? How can you be doing something from waste and yet get paid
Right.
for it? Who would want that output? And why would people want you to come and do that for you and stuff. So
Right.
things like that have been on the key focus when it comes to my parents and my immediate family. And even today, when you go into gatherings or when you go into a formal introduction kind of a setup, I think one key question is कुछ तो करते हैं, पता नहीं है exactly क्या करते हैं, but हाँ कुछ तो
Right.
waste के साथ कर लेते हैं. So it's very difficult to
Right.
decode. And these are like just parents, these are family members. But even when you go to a formal meetings or a formal setup, I think the question remains like, कैसे? फिर फिर क्या होता है? क्यों करना है ऐसा? So I think people who are not into the subject or not experts in subject matter of one dimension also are kind of stuck to the idea of recycling. And that's what it is. That plastic low or recycle karo. And that's it. Plastic is the demonized element in among all the things as scrap we produce. And yes, everything else is fine and everything else has been taken care of. And we just need to keep on focusing on plastic, 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 and keep on recycling things. We don't need to do anything else.
Right. I mean, I would love to dig deeper on these things as well as what you do at Material Library India. But before we do that, I would love to know your background story and how it all started and what's your why behind like doing this.
I think the why is pretty simple. But to tell you in a proper manner, by education, I'm a textile designer. I did my undergrad as a textile design and then moved on to work in textile industry for 4 5 years. I worked as a print developer, as a surface designer, and working in that area for like good 5 4 5 years, realizing that what am I doing? I'm only adding up to the chaos. And while I am adding up to the chaos, there is so much of disconnect from the world for which I'm creating. So I was creating surfaces for Balmain, Givenchy, and all these big brands. So while doing that, it was, I guess it was 2010 or 11 when first time I reached out to one of the very known fashion houses, surface designer, and said that, oh, do you think this is a worth it kind of a entire deal and an entire process? And that's when for the first time I got questioned for who am I to give my opinion kind of a question. And that's
Right.
what triggered the entire thought process and journey, that who am I to ask this question? And how do I validate this question? That who am I and why am I asking this question? And why is this question important? And these are the people who can just put anything on the ramp and runway and get away with like this is what the trend is kind of power. But they choose the other way instead of doing things sustainably. So I think it's interesting at that point when I was not very clear. My rationale was not very tight, but at the same time, I knew that ये काम से काम बनेगा नहीं. मतलब this is not going to take me very far, and I do not want to be stuck into this thing while. So I was thoroughly enjoying my work. I was thoroughly enjoying, like it's like a kid in a toy shop kind of a story, because I love materials and I was a surface
Right.
designer. And when you're doing those kind of crazy brands, price is hardly a limitation. So you just have to bring newness to the table and you keep on creating new things. There is like sky's your limit. But then after a point, you start to see that you're sitting on a pile because everything is so exclusive. It's like you're making garments for 40,000 euros and the production goes 10 across the globe. So can you not change this narrative? And can you not make better things? Because in today's world, when you often question sustainability, what do people say? Sustainability is expensive, right? It's not a cost
Right.
effective thing. So I'm not talking about cost at that point. I'm just talking about something which is like, you are already selling something really expensive. Can we not fix it and sell the right thing?
Right.
So
So
then
I'm
I
sure,
realized,
like, sorry to interrupt you there, but I'm sure, like, this disconnect, I think a lot of textile designers right now also must be facing who are keen on sustainability. And that is why, like, I want to, like, also focus more on the journey. Like, what next steps did you take after this that you felt the disconnect, and what was your decision-making process to go ahead in life?
I think, yeah, you're right. A lot of textile designers should feel that. But at the same time, it's not a journey of only textile designer. It is about textile designers. It is about architects. It is about
Right,
industrial designers. It is about engineers. I mean, what are
definitely.
you making? How are you making? How well are you making? How futuristic vision are you holding while making something? And does that future entails artificial intelligence and IoT and data and all those jazz kind of buzzwords? Or does that entail a very basic understanding of that we have to breathe properly, we have to eat properly, we have to sleep properly? Then, in order to
Right,
do that, we have to take care of the basics first and then move on to the next level. So, I think the order is thoda hila hua right now. And when people are trying to pick things, or people who are feeling the discomfort, it's very easy for them to navigate to these directions, saying that ये ज़्यादा cool है या फिर ये ज़्यादा pay check decent है. Like UX UI for designers is a hotbed right now. And what do you
right,
do? I mean, what do you do, and how do you end up designing things, and how do you plan things around that? Is not even discussed properly. So my journey has been from this discomfort of designing for such huge labels, and then finding that that disconnect for myself. Then moving on to a sustainability journey. I With this conversation, I very quickly realized that this disconnect means that you have to show people. These are the people who have a very tactile kind of vision, and you have to show them what you mean. You When you're talking, you're just not talking something which they are resonating with which they're able to comprehend. So you have to talk which will help them visualize. So yeah, making things right and making things as physical, tangible objects is what came to me naturally, being a designer, being a person who was working with materials, surfaces, and so on and so forth. So hence, materiality became a very important aspect.
right. And so yeah, coming back to your journey. So like after you felt this disconnect, like what I know is that you also did a master's. So would you also like to, throw some light in how that exposure actually changed your perception about things, or and why did you actually opt for that kind of exposure in the first place?
You mean masters in material pictures?
Right, yeah.
Uh, it's a very funny story, Raghav. So
Yeah.
I'm telling you about these things, and I'm trying to go ahead and propose as a new person in the industry. I'm trying to propose sustainability. The designer label to which I was proposing happens to be a St. Martin graduate. So,
Okay.
and when that designer is up there, right? He's a massive name in the industry and was not able to understand what I'm trying to say and where am I coming from. So I was not giving him enough relevance. So I was like, as a very like a curious kid kind of a thinking, like if I go to the same school and talk about the completely different side of the story, will I be heard better? Was the question I asked myself. And that
Okay.
led
Interesting.
to where it led. It's like if you are talking about unsustainable stuff from the same school, and if I go to the same school and talk about extremely sustainable stuff, will that make sense to people?
Right.
Because school doesn't tell you like this is your motto in life. School just guide you to wherever you want to go.
Right.
So that's what happened. That's why I picked it. The course doesn't necessarily teach you to go after waste, go after sustainable materials. Course gives you perspective in various directions. So it's up to you. I made my right from the beginning. Somehow, being an Indian, I guess it comes to you very naturally that problem at hand needs to be solved rather than speculating a problem.
Right.
So speculative design scenarios are mostly a very, very Western word kind of a thing, which most of the colleges and most of the design engineering and design thinking people do hold on to. Somehow, I think it was a very Indianness kind of an attitude which came to me that why am I supposed to speculate a problem when there is enough at hand?
True.
So yeah, and how do I break down this problem? If I don't want to set up a plant, if I just don't want to say like, let's make granules from today on, or let's make recycled cutleries from today on. I want to talk about step prior. I want to talk about step even prior to that. And then I want to talk about the entire systematic structure about it. So how do I do that? And if I have to do that, then where do I start? So all these things, I think, comes to you as an individual based on the path you choose. A school cannot install all this in you. School can give you, so suppose I choose a path of sustainability and waste and all these things. School could be a way to get a deeper understanding of it.
Correct.
It can be a medium, but it cannot be a director of your thoughts.
Right. Understood.
So the thought started, I think my SOP started with this waste notion, comparison of craft notion. And that's how I actually got into that school. And then whatever journey has led from there. But yeah, I think this thought was prior to even thinking of which school to go to, even
Right.
thinking of going for a master's or not. I think this thought was even before that, when I was trying to suggest to someone that, hey, can we do things differently? That is the process when the thought was consciously, subconsciously was existing. And then moving further, how do you keep on tightening up your brief and rationales and moving further is what has happened in the journey of 10 years.
Right. So, yeah, moving fast forward, and so what led to the inception of Material Library of India, and what are some of the challenges that one faces while setting up such a research-based or even like a circular-based practice in India?
I think you partly answered the question by saying setting up in India. We are we we are blessed with the abundance of a lot of industrial waste, a lot of, in our previous conversation in person also, we are
Yeah.
blessed with both the kind of waste, agricultural waste and industrial waste. And we often talk about it is a problem, it is a problem, it is a problem. But people who do not have this material in abundance cannot come and tell you that how to solve this.
Right.
So you have to develop your own kind of methodology to tackle it. And while doing that, I mean, someone has to travel the road less traveled kind of a thing. So we talk about recycling. We as a country talk about home-based understanding of very resourceful living, very very like utilizing our resources to the best kind of living. We always had that. But when it comes to technically transferring that information, what stops us? So most of the people come and visit Material Library and wonder that, oh, where is the setup? Where is the machinery? Where do you process all this waste? No, I mean, when you break it down for them and you tell them that you work at lab level, you do not try to do like, oh, give me like 100 tons of waste and I'll process it and give it back to you. You try to tell them that how do you reduce this? How do you improvise upon the quality of the waste which you're getting if you can't eliminate it from your system? And how do you get a better output of this waste so that you don't have to treat it as a liability? It becomes an asset for your business model. So talking about all these things, I think this is very, very important and absolutely missing in the dimensions of sustainability in India. Material Library is one of the library based out of waste around the globe. there is none. And material library is the first library in India.
Yes.
So these are the two things which makes us the fast. So which is we are traveling the road never been traveled, not less traveled. But why? Because country like ours knows frugal innovation, resourcefulness at the back of our hand. We are not blessed with innovative materials. We as a nation have not been into innovation of materials and consciously been doing it. We have been subconsciously doing it for generations. Now, what are we blessed with? We are blessed with a lot of industrial and agricultural waste. Industrial waste is the problem right now. Agricultural waste is a solution moving forward.
Right.
Now, the dilemma in between, which people don't often understand, that if you have to make agriculture waste as a futuristic material, you do not mix it with industrial waste. I mean, those are the kind of conversations we are interested in. Those are the kind of conversations where we try to tell what is materiality, why is this a problem, and why is that a
Right.
better solution.
So exactly that directly links it to my next question, which is like, is there such a thing such as a good material or bad material? Or so what is your opinion on that?
Of course, there is a thing as good material or bad material, but of context changes a lot of things. So, in what context? Plastic is not a bad material. Plastic is a good material, but you're using it in what context?
Right.
Yes, when you fill momos ka chutney into it and then don't know what to do with it, it's a bad material.
Yes.
Versus when you
Yes.
use it in a flood stuck situation where you save lives, you do not have an alternative. So plastic is in numerous formats right now. Plastic is not necessarily a bad material. How do you deal with it? If you deal with it only for your convenience, and if you deal with it only with like your negligence and irresponsible behavior, yes, it is a bad material.
Yeah, so you were actually mentioning that we are in between industrial waste and trying to explore agriculture waste. Can you like elaborate more on that? Like, are you actually pointing towards like innovations such as biomaterials while as well as dealing with the industrial waste, like how you're dealing, or is there another context to it?
Not necessarily we are dealing in that way. We are dealing in various dimensions. And I mean, there's not one way. We are doing everything from mapping to material research to biomaterials. But when I'm saying industrial waste to agricultural waste journey, agriculture waste is a future material. That's a natural material which is capable of taking care of itself, but in due course of its natural elements and its nature.
Right.
It can't just vanish. Sorry.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is not going to reduce, right? Agriculture waste is not going to reduce in future. Like we are growing as population, we are trying to look at ways how to multiply and enhance our land productivity and soil productivity. Although we are losing the battle there, soil is something which we are really not doing good at. But we have to increase that productivity, right, as human race for the survival and so on. Industrial waste is something which is constantly becoming a problem. Aaj ye ban aaya hai, tomorrow there will be a ban on something else. Day after tomorrow there have to be an EPR on every other industry, not only plastic waste management. So right now it's only PWM which is facing the EPR. Why EPR is only on PWM versus not the other industries? How are other industries doing better? These are the kind of questions, sooner we ask, the better it is. And this is where we are trying to bridge the gap, that if you tell people that stop making everything, that's not the solution, right? They cannot stop making everything. And if you tell people that stop making these stupid materials, right, start making something beautiful and 100% sustainable, is that a solution? Is that possible? No. You have to help them transition, right? And how do you help them transition? How do you help them understand their own systems? How do you help them understand their own materials? So to be able to do that, I think you have to help them transition slowly, and that's what I am talking about. That one being a problem, another being a future resource available in abundance as we move further. It's better we keep mapping both.
Right. So you've also been an advocate of material literacy, but for people who do not know about like materiality, can you actually elaborate more on what is material literacy and why do we need it?
I think materiality is not a problem. Yes, design can eliminate a lot of waste. Design is capable of doing that. As a country in India, people don't see that design being a very strong element. So people see that, ये तो ऐसे ही बन जाता है. So that's why design has not been given so much importance as a country in ours. But talking about material literacy, even in marketing, I am a student or engineering student. How many materials do we touch in a day?
Right.
And it comes to, so that's one question, right? How many materials do we deal with and how many materials do we touch in a day? The second question is, when we talk about segregation, do you even know how many types of segregations are required? On what basis you segregate? And what basis you leave your waste to someone else saying, अरे कोई ना कोई तो इसकी recycling करता ही होगा ना. Somewhere someone will do that recycling. Someone must be taking care of it. But how will that someone will reach to your garbage bin when you're mixing it all together and you don't know where to put it? Understanding materiality, understanding that how what is made up of, or understanding what is your everyday choices ka footprint, or understanding that what it takes to bring your that basic convenience like a mobile screen guard. Once it breaks down, where does it go? What is it? Glass, polymer, glue, adhesives? What is it? Do you know? And that's something which you touch like 15, 16, 18 hours a day.
Right.
But you don't know. Once it breaks, you don't know where to put it. You put it in glass, you put it in plastic, you put it in fiber, you put it in some other third kind of recycling. Is it even recyclable? So these are the questions which material literacy tries to pose at people. And we are saying, let's find these answers together so that we can consciously use the materials which we do not know the solution to. And when, no matter how much from top of what pyramid governments and authorities keep shouting that segregate, what does it even mean? Do you know what is recyclable? Do you know what is non-recyclable? And is it your job to know what is recyclable or non-recyclable? Or is it your job to know that सिर्फ थैला ही लेकर के क्यों जाना है? थैले के अंदर रख करके क्या ला रहे हो? थैले के अंदर भी 4 पहिया अगर रैप कर करके अंदर रख करके ले आ रहे हो तो सिर्फ थैला लेकर के क्यों जाना है?
Right.
So basically asking these questions help you understand the materiality of your everyday choices, and these choices only translate into whether it's conscious consumerism, whether it's picking up a startup and saying that, oh, I will try to change an innovative material, I will change this particular industry by making this innovative material. How will you change it? What will you change? You have to understand the ecosystem around a material. So material literacy tries to pose those kind of questions on every segment of the society, not only schools, not only colleges. Yes, we try to, it's a much more structured format when it comes to colleges, but our workshops are open to every kind of age group.
Interesting. Like I can also maybe vouch for this kind of workshop because what we feel as students of architecture is also something that what happens in colleges is that you've been taught about form follows function and all these things, but nobody talks about material. So you make good drawings, you talk about like fancy forms, then you come up with elevations and renderings, and in the end, then once all this is ready, then you start thinking about, like what material to use to like actually finish that project. But that's not how the indigenous people used to work. So
No,
they used to
see,
actually look at what's available in their immediate surroundings, and actually they had this intimate relationship with materials that sometimes like you try to shape them and sometimes the material responds how it wants to be used. So that kind
right.
of relationship we have lost with materials, I feel, in the design field as
Yeah,
well.
who's that British architect Lowry Baker?
Hmm.
You must have heard his name. Who
Yeah,
is
right,
no more, but I mean, he pretty much practiced all his life sustainable architecture by just
right.
following one quote given by Mahatma Gandhi. Just take a radius of 5 kilometers.
Hmm.
and that 5 kilometer radius may find the materials and start building. So he
Right.
practiced that architecture style for most of his life. And why? I mean, why would he do that? He was he was a very pretty learned architect, right? So
Right.
yeah, you have these very beautiful examples of people who have made their living out of it, who have set up great examples for us to learn from. So and 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 I think when it comes to material, especially when it comes to waste, a lot of reverse engineering is happening. Whether it's a natural element waste, agricultural waste, or whether it's a man-made material waste, like biological nutrient or a chemical nutrient. So whichever flow of material you take, I think it's pretty simple that it has to be reverse engineered because you are getting a hold of it by the end at the end of the life, and now you have to test backward that how does it function for your kind of need and requirement. So it's a at many levels it's a reverse engineering, whether it's processes. So when you saying form follows function, um, I think वो थोड़ा सा उल्टा पड़ जाता है, right? When
Right.
it
Exactly my
comes
point.
to this kind of material related work, like when
Right.
you start and material leads your way. Because in our
Right.
case, material leads the way. If someone comes and says like make a chair and make a chair out of waste, a proven waste, yes, we can make a chair, but then we are not needed, right? Because it's proven. Someone is making that already. So go to that person. Then we are not needed. But if you say that let's make a chair out of this material, then we say like, hey, that brief is thoda teda. Because we don't know whether that chair will be able to sustain a weight of 100 kgs or 150 kgs or not. That's a usual comparison you will make, and you will want that particular product to perform in certain manner because there are standard comparisons available in the market. So how about doing this in a way that you actually tell us that let's figure out where this material leads and then fit it into your requirement.
Talking about processes and reverse engineering, and I'm sure Material Library India does much more than creating this amazing bank of materials. So, can you quickly walk us through the process of a project, like how things function?
That is pretty diverse, Raghav, because
Okay.
not necessarily when you're working on when you're working on the sustainability aspect, not
Right.
everything is about you just take, make, break.
Mm-hmm.
We are not like a maker's lab. It's a research process. So sometimes the research process only entail mapping. Sometimes the research process entail mapping, suggesting intervention, and then comes the material research part. Sometimes it's straight to the material research. Sometimes it's none of this but outreach. Sometimes it's not any of these things, but still a very hands-on, research-oriented way of lab testing and then figuring out. So it just depends, like what is the brief and what is the scope of the work you are handling. Um, at the same time, to answer this question in a better way, uh, when it comes to materials, there are two types of things which we do. One is system design and one is material design. And then there comes a layered way of approaching each problem we have been given. So, so yeah, every time the brief can change the not the core methodology, but the added up methodology of how you approach that particular problem or industry.
Right.
I'm not sure. It's kind of complex, but yet super simple.
Right. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
sustainability is nothing, but like just consciously observing things and fixing and like plugging in the right details. But at the same time, what are right details and how are you amplifying and measuring their impact is also kind of which is makes it detailed and complex because often you have to convert these things into numbers and often you have to convert these things into tangible outputs. So it becomes very different as a relationship depending on the brief. But then we are doing the same thing. We are just trying to fix the materiality flow of supply chain. We are trying to change how the output gets looked at, how at source material and waste can be reduced. Yeah, essentially
Right.
we're doing that.
Right. So you mentioned that it is simple at the same time there are complex problems. And do you think like how important it is to approach them through a generalist or a multidisciplinary approach?
It's very simple from a multidisciplinary approach. You cannot approach it like, oh, I am a product designer, I'm not going to look at anything else. No, that doesn't work in our kind of work. And we often, whenever we put out our job post also, I think we just don't say that we are looking for a master's degree person candidate or a person with like so and so kind of an experience. It's very difficult to define. Like a doctor turned a sustainability enthusiast would be a fit, great match for our kind of profile. A person like a visual communication designer who understands sustainability can do wonders communicating our projects. But a person who
Interesting.
doesn't understand sustainability and is only a graphic or a visual communication designer, what will we do? I mean, you have to keep on fixing the terminology. You have to keep on fixing and telling person that, hey, this is not the way this is not the way we are trying to handle this problem. This is not the way we are trying to answer this challenge. So can we talk any better? Can we talk differently? So I mean, it's just having that attention to detail of like what is sustainability, and yet understanding that sustainability is like living consciously, conscious of your surroundings, conscious of your well-being, conscious of your how you are being, just being.
Right. Interesting. I second your thoughts, and I also feel that uh, that now we cannot just see technology as a nemesis, and at the same time, it's very interesting to explore in an interdisciplinary way on how nature and technology could merge, and even
Yes.
waste and technology could merge. So I want to ask, like, if there are any emerging trends via technology that could, like impact the fashion industry in a big way. Are you looking forward to any such trends now?
We're not looking forward to any such trends, although we keep getting these questions and inquiries, which are very interesting. How can we make this waste into this particular format? And if we have to make this waste into this particular format, how will we behave like a traditional material which people are trying to compare it with, which is readily available
Okay.
in the market? So those are the questions which we keep getting. And then you try to tell them that this is not the only way. Actually, look at waste as a legit resource. I mean, it's a raw material. If you don't tag it as waste, and we can tell you how to look at it differently, and we can tell you how this can behave differently for you. So that is something which we are trying to bridge the gap of. So where the use of virgin raw materials can be reduced. Yeah.
Understood. So another curious question I have is like you are an inspiration to me. Like who or what inspires you from the design world? It could be a person, it could be any interesting project that might have caught your eye recently.
Um, Not necessarily from the design world, but I think I don't know if you know that lady Vandana Shiva.
Yeah,
So
Navdanya.
Vandana Shiva, yeah, Navdanya. So Vandana Shiva is someone who has been an inspiration.
Right.
So I mean, the amount of work, the amount of direction she has given to the field of soil, seed, and agriculture, it's mind blowing. I mean, she's talking from the time we didn't even we weren't even aware of these terminologies to and problems to be existing in, I mean, in the first place. She's talking about it, she's fighting about it since then. So and having a vision and having the bandwidth to continue to battle that thing and to stop the patterns, to stop to bring up the drought prone areas from non-GMO based seeds, picking up fights against these huge corporates, and still trying to put your point across in a very, very reasonable and a very strong manner. I think, yeah, she's someone I really admire. And honestly, it's the word of sustainability is not restricted to design.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and she's an inspiration for me as well. I just haven't happened to see her movie that got launched. It's on my list. But yeah, I've been following her work for a long time. And now, like since you mentioned in the previous question that that you've been getting inquiries about like forming a new material totally that could be available. So also because a lot of material designers have come on this podcast, and I'm sure to have a lot more of them on this. So this is a question that when you go about designing a new material right now with this whole like every the knowledge you have in background. So how do you strike a balance between, maybe longevity and maybe biodegradability also, maybe when you're using waste, like how to close the loop?
Uh, I think material leads the way, Raghav, because to answer it very simply, if you're using some material which is coming from a family of a natural material, then you think about biodegradation, think about compostability, you think about disintegration, you think about the scenarios in which it will behave in a certain way. But when you're working with waste or you're developing a new material from industrial materials, these questions completely get eliminated. You just think about how can you create least amount of intervention and yet get the best output. Because end of the day, recycling or any kind of resource intensive process is not happening for free. That's a cost to the environment. And whenever we talk about cost, we talk about environmental cost rather than talking about cost in a monetary terms. So it is a cost, and who's paying that cost is the first question which we ask, and then from there on, uh, the the path starts to get clearer and clearer.
Right, maybe these questions are more applicable, as you rightly said, to maybe people designing materials with agriculture waste right now. And that leads me to another question, which I would like to know your perspective is like what are your thoughts on these kind of innovations happening like kombucha leather, mycelium leather, and people working with seaweed extract and stuff?
They're great. I mean, these kind of material innovations are brilliant. Uh, Provided I think I'm a fan of less brainwashing kind of materials. You are not only doing greenwashing, but you're mixing like 20% of
Yeah,
polymer family material or like 10% to give it a strength or give it a backing or in the form of adhesive and saying that, oh, it will last forever. Let's not do that.
right.
And yeah, and let's not fool ourselves because it starts from us. And
Okay.
then in that case, what you're doing is you're essentially trapping your natural material in which is capable of taking care of itself into polymer based material, which will even spoil its bandwidth of taking care of itself and will be stuck among us forever. Because when you're saying this is the new material, there is no set data sheet, there is no set recycling facility, there is nothing which has been created for this material. Who's going to handle this and
Right,
how?
very valid point. Yeah. Again,
So
like the
when you're saying
marriage
new
needs to be
material,
very important, even if something
yes,
like this has happened.
and to make that right kind of marriage, you have to understand the flow of the material, nutrient flow of the material. Where is it coming and why?
Right, very valid points there. And so
I'm
before,
happy when I see
yeah,
materials who claim that, oh, this disintegrates in this many period. That means they have understood and they have asked the right kind of questions at the beginning, at the conceiving stage, that this has to disintegrate. Versus the people who have said that, oh, we have made something innovative, this will not disintegrate, or they don't even talk about disintegration and they talk about how can you compare it with the existing conventional material in the market.
right,
So, I mean, then who talks about end of life? Because when you're saying you're making a new material, nobody knows what has gone into it.
At the
So
same
yeah,
time, they're so new that we're not able to test that fact. Like, for example, when Green Revolution happened, people thought that it was the best solution at that time, but we only get to see its effect now. But at this, I'm sure like we have a long way to go when it comes to new material researches, because we might as well need some new materials also, because things like now, if you imagine in earlier times, what was the material palette for an indigenous population? Everything was existing here. So now there are laws for XYZ complex reasons that you cannot take your wood, you have to buy the stone, and like you cannot mine slate. And these are like it's not, I'm not saying that it's black and white, everything is gray, but because of that we need some materials, to replace all that is banned or by law or whatever reason. So, what are your thoughts on that?
the materials which we have lost, we have converted them into something else. It's high time we take them as resources, which
True.
often gets regarded as waste. There is a reason. It's not like landfills are hollow,
Hmm.
they're filled with something.
Right.
And when you keep on discarding anything and everything, and you keep on counting on what has gone missing from your material palette, it's not happening like that. Like there is a feed in and there is a feed out. It's not just everything is vanishing in thin air. So
Right.
you better start counting those material as resources. And we often say that our motto, which is on our website as well, that before too soon, when our natural resources become scarce and waste accumulation reaches a tipping point, waste streams will become the future quarries for mining materials.
Very interesting. I think
So,
that's a perfect message uh, to like
yeah, I
end this
mean, when
podcast. But
yes,
at the
I
same
guess
time, I
that
would love to know your future plans. Like, what big plans do you have? It's
well, the plan is to plug this whole thought process and methodology into a city-wide government-equipped kind of system, so that these questions become legit across industries. And for us, when we try to work with waste, it's challenging to collect clean waste as a raw material from someplace because people don't often see value in it, and
right,
that process needs to go across. So we are just trying to amplify that message and that thinking, and I think that's the next direction, that how that amplification can be done.
right. So yeah, like thank you so much. This has been an absolute masterclass for me as well. Like there was so much that what I don't know that I got to learn about, and like definitely change and shift our perspectives and definitely broaden the horizons of my mind. And I'm sure there are so many topics that we talk that we could, like have multiple podcasts in future to talk on those things. But it's always
Yeah,
lovely talking to you. Thank you
yeah.
for like
Thank you
coming
so
and
much. Thank you so much, Raghav.
Thank you for listening. Please consider sharing it with your friends and subscribing the podcast.